wouldn't be able to tell you.
What do you want to say to them?
I'm at home when the phone rings. And they've deliberately, if you look at the clock that the cord was cut from.
Didn't they find her keys in a dumpster?
Yeah, because that's where I'd gone and thrown them. And I told them in my statement, I didn't know Wenda's name, she didn't know. She knew my name started with a B, and that was it.
This is the story of a man, Brett Hartman, who ended up on the row for a horrific crime that shook a community, but one he claimed he never committed. Let's dive into his story. Who was Brett Hartman? Brett Xavier Hartman was an American man who became relatively famous due to his conviction for a slaying in Ohio. His case was popularized due to the gruesome nature of the crime, and made even more famous due to the shocking twists and turns. Despite intense legal drama and a case that confused spectators, one thing that remained constant was Hartman's claim that he was innocent and the vociferous support in his favor. We must first understand Hartman's story, conviction, and the following trial to understand all the concerns and controversies linked with the case. That is the story of how a single 23-year-old male with no history of prior criminality found himself in front of an Ohio court.
What do you want to tell them?
It's hard to, you always have so much to say, and then when people ask you don't know what to say.
So I guess I want to hear your side of it.
Yeah, my main issue is, the state of Ohio just does not want to ask why. Why would no other time in Ohio's history on, critical pieces of evidence?
He was a man with a ready smile, well-liked by all who knew him, but he now faced a jury that saw him as a monster and a prosecution who claimed he had slayed her in a rage after a lover spat. Crime and arrest. On September 9, 1997, Wanda Snipes was discovered to be deceased at her Akron apartment. The victim had been found savagely slain with her throat slit and her hands chopped off by Brett Hartman. She had been knifed over 100 times. Hartman had called 911 after he came upon her mutilated body when he went to check on her. In a shocking turn of events, the cops arrested Hartman shortly afterward due to the abundance of DNA evidence around the corpse linked to him. According to eyewitness testimony, Hartman met Wanda at the Bucket Shop, an Akron bar. He kissed Wanda on the cheek and they talked. After that, Hartman and Wanda left the bar and went to her apartment across the street. David Morris, an acquaintance of Hartman and Wanda, observed Wanda and Hartman through the upstairs window of her apartment. Morris testified that Wanda was yelling at Hartman about touching stuff that was not his. Hartman closed the window blinds, and obviously she wasn't very happy about it because she scolded him and reopened the blinds.
I have no idea. Yeah. I think life ideal, besides, stories of what life is like out there, how to, I wouldn't be able to tell you.
What do you want to say to them?
And no one in the world deserves to lose a relative or anyone the way that Wenda's. I just like to say that my heart goes out to him.
At around 4:30 p.m. that afternoon, Wanda was observed crossing a street in a nearby business district. She was never seen alive again. Hartman had the day off from work on September 9. According to Richard Russell, a bartender at the In-Between, Hartman entered the bar around 8 p.m., appeared nervous and hyper, and talked excessively. After that, Hartman was in and out of the bar 5 to 6 times between 9 and 10:30 p.m. Hartman first contacted the police on September 9 with a series of anonymous 911 calls, which he later admitted to. His first 911 call reported the location of a mutilated body. The police officers dispatched to Wanda's address, entered Wanda's apartment building, and checked around, but left after finding nothing unusual. Meanwhile, Hartman viewed the police unit's arrival and departure while hiding behind a tree across the street. Hartman then made another 911 call telling the police to return to the apartment building and providing further instructions on the body's location. Morris, having learned that Wanda had been slain, suggested to Hartman that he should talk to the police since Morris had observed Hartman at Wanda's apartment the previous evening. Shortly before midnight, Hartman approached Detective Gregory Harrison outside Wanda's apartment. Hartman walked up to Harrison and said, "I hear it's pretty bad in there," and asked if Harrison had ever seen anything so gruesome. Later that evening, Hartman approached Harrison a second time.
I'm at home when the phone rings. It's not, I think one thing that never goes good with the clemency board and with a lot of people is, I didn't know Wenda's name. She didn't know. She knew my name started with a B, and that was it. If we were alone when bars closed, I guess sometimes it's better to go home with someone than go home alone. So it was sort of, I went over to her place sort of looking for basically just looking for a hookup.
Hartman was kind of mumbling to himself, and Harrison heard Hartman say that she was a whore, she was a big whore, she got what she deserved. Hearing this, the police suspected that something was wrong with Hartman's narration. Furthermore, after forensic specialists analyzed the crime scene, DNA linking to Hartman was abundant around the body. Hartman claimed this was because they had been intimate that morning and because he had attempted to move the body when he had first discovered it. The police found the entire story suspicious and arrested Hartman. He claimed to be innocent, but the police believed the DNA evidence was sufficient and moved to convict him. Trial and conviction. In 1998, Hartman was put on trial for Snipes' slaying. The prosecution presented their primary evidence to be DNA recovered from the lifeless body of Wanda Snipes, an erroneous blood splatter regarding Hartman's t-shirt, as well as the testimony of an acquaintance. After Hartman's apartment had been searched, the police found Wanda's wristwatch on his nightstand. Hartman cooperated with the police throughout the investigation and trial. He allowed his entire body to be photographed and even took a lie detector test.
Didn't they find her keys in a dumpster?
Yeah, because that's where I'd gone and thrown them. And I told them in my statement, I said, my first instinct was get everything that shows you've been here and get out. And her keys, and as I was running, I crossed the street and threw them in a dumpster.
Both were inconclusive about whether Hartman had attacked Wanda. The prosecution and jury, however, believed the DNA evidence and holes in Hartman's story to be enough evidence, and he was convicted of the slaying. On May 22, 1998, he was sentenced to the end row.
And I believe a long period of time was building maintenance. So he had access to all the keys in the apartment for every apartment. Point out, they've never, in reference to the t-shirt, clearly whoever with any blood.
The appeals. The first bit of drama regarding the trial occurred at the very start, when the prosecution attorney was selected. When Brett went to trial, he faced a well-known prosecutor to be overzealous and would try to win at all costs. She was also known to over-indict, violate disclosure rules, withhold evidence, and target opposing defense attorneys. Brett faced this with a defense team that did little to nothing to defend him, never asking or accepting Brett's side of events, saying they preferred to let the evidence tell them what happened and then relied on the state's evidence for trial.
And they've deliberately, if you look at the clock that the cord was cut from, why, their excuse for why they didn't lift those prints? Mr. Hartman said he didn't, prosecutor's job is to be fact finder. So I ask people, if, the case against me is so strong, why lie about so much and why not do the testing?
Brett's defense also failed to call any witnesses to testify on Brett's side of the story. Immediately after the verdict, Hartman appealed the decision based on the poor quality of defense he had received. The U.S. District Court, for example, upheld the capital sentence despite noting that Hartman's lawyer's presentation of mitigation evidence was not exemplary and might have fallen below standards recommended by the American Bar Association. The trial was further taken up to the Sixth Circuit Court of Appeals, but in July 2007, the Sixth Circuit concluded that Hartman's sentencing phase representation had been constitutionally adequate. In February 2009, the Ohio Parole Board considered the case for clemency. Since being on the row, Brett Hartman has earned a paralegal qualification, been ordained as a minister, and taught himself to paint. The board concluded that, despite his accomplishments in prison, no amount of good deeds can mitigate against the horrors and brutality of this crime. With the appeals being rejected, all doors were shut for Hartman, and he was out of options. The appeals had delayed the date for his end, but only briefly. On November 13, 2012, Brett Hartman met his end by lethal injection.
It's always funny. in the pleadings against doing the DNA, they said it would prove nothing. He said at the scene, he determined her time of death to be late afternoon, early rigor mortis and stuff like that, further determined his determination that she died late afternoon, early evening. And both of them, he said, he went in the whole technical jargon of the deterioration of heads and tails, and, as loud as I could, let's do the DNA testing.
Undeniable controversy. Hartman's case was controversial, both while he was on the row and after he had passed away. Several inconsistencies had attracted the attention of the media, the community, and experts who were quick to point out faults regarding Hartman's conviction. New evidence came to light regarding Brett's case, hidden by the Ohio prosecution, and that his defense never bothered to point out. At the time of the crime, Brett was at home. Phone records show he was there, making and receiving calls from his home during the crime. The person whom he had been talking to on the phone testified in court to that effect. A family member could testify that they witnessed him home at the time in question. Both testimonies were discredited at trial when the coroner tailored his testimony about the time of the demise. Furthermore, testimony against Hartman at trial was later proved to be perjured. Hartman's defense never called their expert witness to analyze the blood on the t-shirt, and many now believe the prosecution's analysis was bad science.
I think I even asked the clemency board. The state thought, I believe, I'm almost certain if it would have proven I was wrong, they'd have run back in front of the clemency board and said, look, he's lying about this, you can't trust him. Where you take 2 steps to the side of it, and you can see in Windows apartment window. And AT&T confirmed I'm telling the truth. And yet no one cares.
Hartman's case has garnered support from various quarters, including anti-capital penalty activists, legal organizations, and individuals who believe in his innocence. These supporters have advocated for a more thorough review of the case. The new pieces of evidence were presented to the appeal courts as notable institutions such as Amnesty International, but the courts upheld the prior conviction. Despite the new evidence showing how much of a sham the trial was, the case was never re-examined. Appeal courts upheld the preceding conviction and sentences, and Brett faced the ending row, bringing an inconclusive end to his battle to prove his innocence. That's all for today, folks. We'll see you next time.